Thank you for joining us today and welcome to our webinar on how to have a bigger and better Easter next year. We're going to do a little fill-in here as people are joining us online and signing into the webinar. Today we're going to be interviewing Charles Trimble. Did I pronounce that correctly, Charles?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. He has 12 years experience in the industry from the printing side and even more years in church marketing beyond that. And will be sharing with us his experience, his insights, and maybe even some of his mistakes in order to help you to do a better job at your church marketing, but also help you with expectations and understanding where the opportunities are at, and specifically with direct marketing. When we say direct marketing, what we're talking about is mailing, using the United States postal system. We do live in a digital world, and it's not social media that's going to do a bunch of marketing for you. You really have to understand people, your audience, your message, and all those things. And when you bring together that understanding, it doesn't really matter the medium. And direct marketing is not as crowded as it used to be. Like social media is crowded today. And so there's some really unique opportunities in direct marketing. Let's see how it's going. Okay. And as we do the webinar, do feel free in the chat box there on the right-hand side to ask your questions. And you also will see that there should be an offer button that says sign up now. We'll explain that here in a little bit on what you can do to save some money and to do your first project with Truth Advertising. So Charles, thank you for joining us today. Why don't you just give us a little background about yourself and Truth Advertising?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Hugh. Appreciate being here today and glad that I can be here. As you said, I've been with Truth Advertising for about 12 years. And so I've been working with the direct mail and advertising of that aspect with them for that amount of time. And obviously, I'm passionate about churches, but one of the reasons I'm passionate about churches is that I've actually worked on staff with several churches before I ever came to Truth Advertising. And one of the biggest things I would see is good marketing, and one of the biggest things I would see is bad marketing. So, I was passionate even before about trying to reach people in the community, and this has given me an opportunity, I believe, to help multiple churches besides just one to help reach their community for reaching people for their church.
Okay. So I'd like to welcome Joseph, Cheryl, Donnie, and Scott in the chat box. Let us know, have you done direct marketing before and what kind of results you saw when you did direct marketing? Just enter that in the chat box there on the right-hand side. So Charles, what makes for a successful Easter service?
Okay. Well, basically, a successful Easter service is people in the pew, if you will, or people in the seats. A lot of times, people may say, well, it's not about numbers, it's not about this sort of thing. And I understand that. But the whole thing is that as a church, we're there to reach people. And Easter is one of the best times to reach people from your community. It's when people are the most responsive. It's when people are most likely to come and attend out of any other time of the year. And the bottom line is that churches spend a lot of resources, whether that be money, whether that be time, all of these type of things in order to have a service on Easter Sunday. Pastors are typically going to preach a very evangelistic message. And if you don't have people that are coming from the outside, then I think that you have not had a successful Easter. You spend all that time and energy in doing that without the kind of response you want. It's kind of like the Super Bowl. Always consider Easter Sunday the Super Bowl for churches. It'd be just like if the Super Bowl in the NFL was to spend all this time and making sure they had a halftime performance, making sure they had the teams ready to go and all this, but didn't sell a single ticket to the Super Bowl. I mean, it would be a disaster at that particular point. So it's the same thing for churches, is that, bottom line, you can do all these things and all those things are important, but if you don't bring people in, it's not going to be a successful Easter.
Thank you. So why do most churches fail to bring in new people?
Well, I think most churches, first of all, every church markets itself. A lot of times people don't think they market, but really marketing is just presenting yourself to other people of how you perceive yourself to be. And so some churches market in a negative way, some market in a positive way. But the bottom line is that every church is going to be marketing in some capacity of people. It may not be an organized kind of way, but they're going to be marketing. And basically, there's two things that churches should be doing. And one is growing the believer through discipleship, worship, fellowship, that sort of thing, and reaching the unbeliever, whether that's through evangelism, servanthood, that sort of thing. And what happens is a lot of times is that you've got some pastors that are very passionate about growing the people inside the church and yet don't do a good job of leading the people to reach people outside the church. And then other times you have some pastors that are very good about leading people to want to reach people outside the church, but don't do a good job of necessarily leading people into the growth of discipleship and sort of that thing. But the biggest thing is that as a pastor, as a leader, is that they need to be leading the congregation to actively wanting to have a mindset and a culture of reaching new people to come into the church. And so that's really the bottom line, is that most churches fail to have a specific strategy to bring new people into their church.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Charles and Joel. Thanks for joining us. So Scott commented that he's done mail-outs on a small scale. He's looking for ways to do bulk marketing. That's what he wants to get out of the webinar today. So Charles, the next question, what is the best way to advertise your church?
I think the best way to advertise your church is word of mouth. Now, you may be surprised that I said that, and you may be saying, well, what am I saying? If you're in the direct mail, why would you say word of mouth? But the reality is that word of mouth is going to be the least expensive way to reach new people. It's going to be the best way. If people are talking about your church and they're communicating good things, on the same time, people can be negative about your church, and that's going to be bad as well, but that's still how people market. The problem is that word of mouth is limited. You know, most churches that we work with, they may have maybe 20, 30, 40, 100 people, 150 people. And, you know, every pastor wants every individual in the congregation to invite 5 people every single week. The bottom line is that most people in the church, after about 5 to 10 weeks, are going to run out of people to invite new to that church. So what happens is that, you know, even if you have a church of 100 people, typically those people may have access to 500, 600, maybe 1,000 people that they can reach out. And even though that may seem like a lot, the bottom line is that most of those people are already people that go to church somewhere or have already said no to them once. And so you really need to be able to have a way to go beyond that if you really want to bring in new people. So that's where I think that direct mail can be one of the most effective strategies. And the reason that direct mail can be so effective is it's basically threefold for a church. One, there is a nonprofit rate that the post office offers to a church. So it's less expensive than what it costs the Pizza Hut down the street to advertise. 2, it allows you to directly target specifically the people right around your church location, right there in your community with 100% saturation. No other kinds of medium is able to do that. And then the third thing is that it allows you to basically do all of this in a way that's not going to, even though it's a little bit of costly, it's going to do it in a way that's not going to necessarily break your budget overall in reaching those people.
Sure. Yeah, one attribute you talked about, the saturation, is like if we make a post on Facebook, it has to go into a feed.
Right.
And that feed moves.
Right.
So you've got 3 minutes for people to see your feed before it's gone. Direct mail, they have to get the mail out of the mailbox. They are going to see it, and everybody's going to see it in your community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I think about 98% of people, you know, check their mail, you know, on a daily basis or almost daily basis. Besides my brother, he's about the only one I know that doesn't actually ever check his mail, and his daughter has to bring in the mail pretty much oftentimes for him. But for the most part, most people are going to check their mail. You know, radio, you know, you can flip the station or listen to satellite, you know, television, you can skip through the commercials. Social media, we just basically get to the point where we don't even necessarily acknowledge that there's an ad or anything else that's coming on. But direct mail, most people still take, grab, and read it and do something to respond to it.
Right. Okay, so the next question is, what are some of the biggest reasons people do not do direct mail?
I think probably the biggest reason that people don't do direct mail is knowledge and money. You know, first of all, people may have heard about it, but they don't really understand it. They don't really know how to do it. So, you know, that's obviously where we can help us. We kind of guide them straight through the process. It's a lot easier than I think a lot of people think. You know, some people may have done direct mail before. I was talking to a lady yesterday where their direct mail that they've done was basically going through the phone book, writing out addresses, and putting a stamp on a postcard to send out to them. You know, I think after about 300 or 400 pieces of that, I wouldn't want to do direct mail either. But the other thing is money. You know, everybody we talk to, and obviously I know that budgets are limited, and that's understandable. And it does cost a little bit of money in order to do direct mail. But the bottom line is the payoff for doing direct mail can be way more than what the kind of money that you spend into it. But that still is going to be the number one thing that's going to hinder most people from wanting to get started and doing it. They just don't want to take the sacrifice to spend a little bit of money and do what it takes to reach new people for that.
All right. Yeah, Joseph shared with us that his wife checks her email months after whatever the offer is expired. That's a rare case there. Do share your questions there in the chat box on the right. We'll get a little deeper here in direct mail and how it works and how you can use it. One person commented, direct mail is not that hard. A lot of people don't understand how the price compares to the return on investment. You want to address that? What is return on investment and what you're looking for when you do a direct mail?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that's a huge way to look at it. And here's what's difficult. You know, when we're talking about churches, it's a lot difficult to sit there and talk about that a little bit. But I think that's important to do. I mean, first of all, you know, people think, oh, goodness, if it takes me $100 to reach one new person, I mean, that's a lot of money. You know, I might as well hand out $100 bills, you know, for people to come into church. And there's actually been a church that has done that before. But the reality is that, you know, when you think about it, if you can get one person to come into the life of your church and just even give sporadically, I'm not even talking about any kind of tithing or anything else, they could pay for that one mailer over a period of a year's time. And typically on a particular mailing campaign, if you're doing it right and doing it effectively, you're going to bring in 10, 15, 20 different families that are going to come in. Now, here again, I know some of those people may not necessarily stay long term, but, you know, it's not the silver bullet. But at the same time is that you have to continue to put forth that. And there is a return. It's different than if you're just selling a product, obviously. But the reality is that, you know, first of all, what do you put a price on one soul? I mean, you could say it that way, but when you come to the numbers thing, if one person just comes in and, like I said, just gives just even moderately, you're going to be able to pay more than the cost of that particular mail piece. Just give you an example. One of the churches I was helping start here just a few years ago, we had a guy that came in. He had only come a couple times, but he came for the mailer. And he said, you know, he came up to the pastor and said, Pastor, you know, this isn't really the place I feel like I want to be, but I do want to help you guys. I want to support you. And he gave him a check for $10,000. So that more than adequately paid for that mailer and another couple after that. So, you know, it can definitely be better than you think in a lot of ways.
Right. So we have a person asking about, are you trying to gather people from other churches or reach the unchurched? You
know, the unchurched is really where you want to reach. Obviously, I would hope that's where most churches want to do. I mean, there is a lot of shuffling around, and that happens oftentimes. But, you know, one of the things you're going to have to think about anything direct mail or any kind of marketing you do, obviously, you're going to hit people that are already involved with the church, and so they're not going to respond to it, and that's okay. You're going to hit other people that are, you know, your hardened atheists, if you will, and they're not necessarily going to respond to it. But out of the 60 to 70% of the unchurched people that are out there, which is statistically accurate, is the idea is you want to at least begin to garner some of those people that are there. And so obviously one of the biggest things, and we can talk a bit more about this in a minute, but, you know, when you're trying to reach the unchurched people, you want to give them something that they're going to see that's going to be value for them in the church. You know, and so that's one of the things I think that we see in marketing a lot of times too, is that churches kind of can be too churchy, and all they're doing is attracting church people and speaking to other church people. What we want to help them do is we want to help them speak in a language that is going to reach the unbeliever, the non-church person.
Right. Another version of that is churches advertising about themselves.
Right.
Instead of talking to the person reading the mailer.
Great point. Absolutely.
Yeah. Our next question. A lot of churches have done direct mail, but it has not been effective for them. How would you respond to that?
Okay. And I think that question maybe had come up a little bit earlier, a little bit too. And definitely it's a big question that a lot of people have. You know, a lot of people talk to is like, well, we've already done that. Been there, done that kind of thing. You know, that's the number one thing we hear in churches a lot of times too, right? We tried that before. But when I talk to people, most churches that I see that have not seen it effective have basically either they've said nothing, and or they've said nothing to the wrong people, and or to too few people, let's say. And by that, what I mean is that oftentimes I'll see a church that says, okay, this is the name of our church, this is what time we meet, and this is where we meet. Well, that's great and wonderful if I'm out there trying to look for a church and all of a sudden I get this mail piece that tells me that, hey, you're there. But for the most part, people need more than that. And so one of the things that you want to do is you want to make sure that you're giving some kind of value to that person to get up on a Sunday morning to come and visit your church. You know, people come to church for selfish reasons. You know, obviously, ultimately, we want to disciple those people to be fully functional followers of Jesus Christ. But people, when they are unchurched, when they're lost people, they want to know, how is this going to benefit me? You know, is it going to help me? Is it going to help my family? Is it going to help me, you know, be a better parent? Those are the type of things that you want to try to communicate to a mailer. And those are the things that are going to drive, here again, the unchurched person, and going to drive them to have the effectiveness. The other thing is that a lot of times people have kind of some wrong expectations about, you know, direct mail as well as any kind of marketing. I mean, if you look at just how marketing works, even in the secular world, I mean, you have to hit a lot of people to get even a minimal response rate. And I understand that that seems frustrating and that's upsetting. But here again, you got to look back at the return on investment. And you may send out 10,000 mail pieces and you may only have 10, 15, 20, 30 people that will show up from that 10,000 mail pieces. Well, a lot of people think they can go and send out 1,000 pieces and they're going to get, you know, 100 people show up at the church. And so what has happened is these people have mailed out of 500, they've mailed out 1,000. They didn't say anything necessarily on the card. It didn't look good. The graphics weren't great. And they didn't get anybody to show up, and they think, well, it doesn't work. When in reality, it's the product that they were trying to present and the number of people they were trying to present it to. So,
right. So at Truth Advertising, you're not a printing company. You are a full functioning marketing company that prints.
True. Yeah. I mean, really, 95% of what we do is direct mail, and it's obviously we can do any kind of print resources. We do everything from bulletin shells to, you know, envelopes to, you know, just invite cards, all those type of things that we do. But, you know, obviously our main passion, our main goal is to help churches reach their community. And the number way we can do that is through the use of direct mail. So, and we do social media and some of that kind of stuff too. And not that I'm saying there's not a place for that. Obviously, you know, you want to have a good website, you want to have a good social presence, all that. But if you really want to start bringing in people, I haven't seen anything that's been as effective as direct mail on that.
Okay, so we have a question here about what form of church has been more effective, contemporary or sacramental, or sacrament, I can say it right, sacramental, or non-denomination, Luther, Episcopal. Is there any stats on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, to be honest, I've found this a little bit interesting myself, just because obviously I was a little bit more in a different genre when I worked for churches before I came here. And now we work with all kinds of churches, and I've seen Catholic churches that have been effective in reaching their community through direct mail. I've seen, you know, very traditional churches being effective in reaching people through direct mail, and I've seen, you know, obviously contemporary. Progressive, you know, young, new churches be effective in reaching people with direct mail. The bottom line is that, you know, you've got to be who you are. And there's multiple churches out there, and I think that's actually great. But you're going to attract some people that another church is not. And the reality is, what you want to do is you want to present who you are to that person that's out there. I always kind of use this illustration. It's like, you know, if Pizza Hut all of a sudden decided to start making burgers, and even if it was a great burger, they would have a hard time selling that burger to other people. But, you know, just being themselves and who they are, they're going to be able to reach people for that. And if you're a traditional church, that's fine. Embrace that. You know, don't communicate you're something you're not, because even if people show up, they're going to go and leave, you know, the next week or 6 weeks or whatever else left. But there are people that are going to fit in every one of those kind of categories. And the bottom line, people are looking for community. They're looking for ways to fit in. They're looking for places to belong. And if you provide that as a church, your style of worship, all those things are usually going to be secondary to that person anyway.
All right. Okay, so when you do a direct mailing, what are some of the wins? Okay, for instance, by doing a direct mailing, can I expect somebody to accept Jesus Christ as the Lord of their life? Or what's the win? What is the outcome that I expect from that direct mailing? Or what kind of wins work in direct mailing?
Yeah, I think here's the thing, and I mean, I've had a few churches that they'll put the gospel message right there on the direct mail piece, and I don't have a problem with that. Obviously, I think the more you sow, the wider you sow, the better you'll reap. I think that's important, but I think it's kind of like this: when Jesus was here on this earth, he would feed the multitudes. He would do the miracles and the healings and all those things, and those attracted a crowd. To me, direct mail marketing is about taking those people and say, hey, bring them into your church so that you can have a hearing with them. Now, granted, once you start telling them about the truth of Christ, just as Jesus started saying, hey, unless you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, and everybody ran off, there's still people that aren't going to like the message of the gospel, and that's okay. But what you're trying to do primarily with direct mail is to gain a hearing for it. It's here again, going back to kind of the Easter time. I mean, it's one of the times that people come to church just because they come to church and they think they're supposed to go to church. But that gives you an opportunity to speak truth and speak the gospel to those people. And so I think, to me, that's really the win that you want there. I always tell people that, marketing is more about evangelism. Leave your discipleship, once people come into the church, and then you're able to tell them to speak the truth and do all that and get them there. So.
Mm-hmm. What factors are important to church growth?
Well, I think that's a great question, and reason I think it's a great question is because great marketing isn't going to make up for poor leadership. One of the things that happens is sometimes I talk to some churches, and to be honest, just organizationally, they're not doing well. Systematically, they're not doing well. They just don't have the stuff on the inside that is really ready for their market. In fact, I've told some churches before, I said, look, you know what? You need to get this other stuff in order before you bring people in. First of all, you don't want to bring people in and then leave the next week, because then what you've done is not only have you not gotten those people to come and be involved in the life of your church, is you have basically given them a bad taste of what your church is to tell other people. Going back to that word of mouth, you don't want that kind of word of mouth going back out. So to me, I think one of the greatest factors is to have good leadership and to have a good product that's in there. Even as I mentioned before, website, social media, all those things are important. I've seen people send out a great mail piece, but 80% of the people that get that mail piece are going to go to the website before they ever even come and attend that church. And if all of a sudden they see the website and it looks like it's back from the 80s, which I don't think we had web back then, right? If it looks like it's from the 80s and the last information is not updated in the last 2 years, all of a sudden they're going to have a picture of your church that you don't want them to have. And so there's going to be a disconnect. And so sometimes I've seen churches that are like, hey, it looked like that we had a great mailer, but we don't understand why we didn't get quite the response we had. And we'll go and we'll look at some of those factors, like their location, or look at their factors of like their website, and realize that, look, here are some barriers that are stopping your church growth. So basically the bottom line is that I think you've got to have a full package, in order to be able to effectively reach people. Get the other stuff in order, but at the same time, don't wait until you think everything's got to be perfect before you do some kind of marketing either, because it's never going to be perfect, So those are one of the factors there.
Okay. For those that are online and joined us, do feel free to put your questions in the chat bar on the right. Any questions about the technicalities of direct mail, what has worked, not worked, what's special about your situation at your church that you think may be challenging, and let Charles address that. And so put those on the right there. So Charles, what are some key times for a church to use direct mail to market their church?
Okay. I think one of the things is, as I mentioned even earlier, for a pastor, they want every Sunday to be Super Bowl Sunday. And, what I've tried to communicate to a lot of pastors is that, look, as a pastor, yeah, you're passionate about that. You need to be passionate about that. But if you're going to lead your people, you want to lead them to a few times a year where you can say, hey, this is a big day. This is a special day. This is a time where we're putting together, our best front. We're putting together a marketing package. We're inviting friends. We're inviting guests. We're doing all this at a time. And if you're going to do that, the three best times that we've seen that the effectiveness of direct mail has been is obviously Easter, back to school, fall time is a very huge time, and kind of the Christmas, New Year's time. And the great thing about those times is they're kind of evenly dispersed too. So it's kind of great timing for a church if they can only do those times a year for them to put their marketing strategies along with those. At the same time, really any time can be a great time to market. But other times like Mother's Day, VBS that's coming up, Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day can be a great time to do a family type mailer. Mother's Day can be a great time to do, a parenting type mailer, those kind of things. But basically do it along with some kind of time that's going to be kind of a critical time for people, typically in their pattern of their life or the typical pattern of your church. Obviously you're moving to a new location. That's a huge thing. If you're starting a new service, that's a huge thing. Those are great opportunities that a church really needs to pull the trigger on that too. So.
Okay, we got a question here. Anything unique about small towns or country setting churches using direct mailing?
Oftentimes I sit there and wonder why maybe some of these smaller towns and smaller areas don't do more marketing in that kind of way. Obviously they don't have the amount of people that you do in a suburban area, but as I mentioned, even in a suburban area, most churches aren't going to go beyond 5, 10, maybe 20,000 households, in that area. So, their quantity is going to be limited anyway. To me, in a rural type setting, you basically have a smaller group of people that you can reach, but on the other hand, you can basically reach everybody that's in your community. How many people can say that? And what I think is also important is that it can be unique. A lot of smaller areas don't do direct mail the way that some of these more suburban type areas do. And so I think that at the same time too, a lot of times in these small towns or small areas, a church might have been there for 50 years and people may drive past it, and so everybody thinks, well, everybody knows about our church, but in reality they don't really know who the church is. And so a direct mail campaign can be a great way just to infuse the people in your community, to give them an opportunity to say, hey, this is kind of who we are. This is how we look like. This is how we want to help you have a better life. And there again, show value to those people and bring them in, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talking about some of the different concepts and ideals on a Facebook post today, somebody was asking about Mother's Day. Mm-hmm. And in our interaction, we created this ideal of having a community Mother's Day, looking for the oldest mother, the youngest mother, the mother of the most children, the mother of the most girls, the mother of the most boys, the most generations of mothers that are still alive in the community. And you're asking people to recommend people for this award, right? So right. The people that they're recommending are getting invited to church. The people who do the recommending want to come to church to see if the person they recommend wins, and it becomes a kind of an interactive thing for Mother's Day. So it'll be pretty exciting to see how that works for that particular church that we're working with. Another one is Vacation Bible School has a huge impact with VBS. I've had success going door to door after a mailing, right? So you send that mailing out like on a Thursday, then on Saturday you canvass the neighborhood door to door, and you carry the same mailing with you. And when you do that, the people answering the door ask the questions. They carry the conversation. And we did this in a town, and the shyest person on the group got a contact card. In fact, everybody did that day. We reached one of every 16 homes once every 7 minutes because we did the door-to-door campaign with the direct mail. We did this in another town. I knocked on the door, had the mailer in my hand. The lady grabs it. She writes out that she wants a Bible study a week from Tuesday at 6 p.m. and here's her phone number. I didn't even have to introduce myself. The direct mailing paved the way. But with VBS, the key there is once you get kids signed up for VBS, you then ask them to invite their relatives to the VBS program at the end of the session. And a typical kid can have 8 relatives that they'll invite, and about 2 to 3 of those relatives will come. And so by strategically looking at the big picture and what your objective is and all that, and integrate that in with the direct mail, it really becomes powerful than just throwing a card in the mail and hoping that it works. At Truth Advertising, you guys did a video on New Year's. I thought that was very insightful. You want to share the idea of doing a New Year's mailing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the biggest things, in the new year is people want New Year's resolutions, the kind of new starts. It's all about that, a little bit. And so, you kind of tie in with that. I mean, one of the most effective types of mailers that we do is a sermon series driven kind of mailer. And by that, I mean things that are like, 6 week series on marriage, 6 weeks, series on family, on relationships, on building community, on, getting your finances in order, whatever it may be. And so, the New Year's gives a great opportunity to kind of hit those people that are in your community that are dealing with, maybe job loss or dealing with financial issues or marital issues, whatever else, and to really connect with those people and give them a way that they can actually add value here again to them in their daily lives. So obviously, and that's there again, that's one of the reasons the back to school fall time is so big too, because people do the same type of things. It's basically just, in a sense, it's almost like a new year for people, on the school year kind of calendar kind of thing. So
you mentioned those sermon series, and the topics that you mentioned were pains or needs that people have. What about the pastor who wants to do a sermon series on some prophetic insight in the book of Revelations? Would you recommend he invest on the need of the community over that for a better response?
Yeah, that's a great question. And here's the thing. If you're only going to do 2, 3, 4 mailers a year, obviously you want to make that your biggest evangelistic opportunity to do it. And I have no problem with any of those other kinds of, message series or whatever you want to do. But, what you want to do is you want to try to get a topic that's going to impact the majority of the people that you're communicating to. Now, here again, I mean, I think you can do a great sermon series on the 10 Commandments. But if you're going to do that, I'm also going to say, hey, do it in a way that's going to impact people in a way that's non-churchy. I mean, there's a way that you can market yourself that sounds appealing to people as well. So, I mean, no matter what you're doing, even if it's a topic like that, and I do have some pastors that want to preach on certain topics, and that's okay. Here again, the response may be less than what it would be otherwise, but, take that and do it, market it in a way that's going to be meaningful to people that are unchurched out there in the community.
So one of the challenges is writing copy, saying the right words and such. What kind of process does Truth Advertising go through to help a minister with the copy?
It varies. I mean, we have a lot of sample ideas right on our website, and a lot of them have some copy that we've used for other churches. And so that can be a great way for people to kind of start, adapt, or kind of see kind of maybe what to communicate on a mail piece for the pastors. Other than that, I mean, we have some pastors that'll provide a copy, and we'll just, give them some tweaks or whatever else. But, we've written a lot of copy, ourselves just for some of these churches. If you give me kind of an idea of what you're wanting to preach on, what the message is going to be about, and all that, we'll help you do it. One of the biggest things is you can only say just a little bit, obviously on the card because of space and everything else. But I always tell people, I said, if you were to meet somebody on the street and you had 15 seconds basically to kind of tell them what your message is going to be about, what your church is like, and invite them to come, how would you say that? You only have maybe 6 or 7 sentences you can even do to do that. But the idea is that you just want to be able to connect with people. You want to make sure you have that personal invitation. Hey, we want you to come this Sunday and visit us, and tell them how they're going to basically, be able to, have the community or have a better relationship or a better life or whatever it may be, from that.
So for photos and graphics, I'm sure some pastors and churches have some of their own. But what do you look for in a good photo or graphic in a postcard?
Sure, that's a great question. One of the biggest things you want to do, so if you look at some of our designs, and some of them have veered from this, but the biggest things you want to do is you want to grab people's attention. I mean, that's true of any kind of marketing. You've got to grab people's attention. But then you also want to engage them. You want to start kind of bringing them to like, okay, yeah, you got my attention. Now what? You want to tell them something. And so when you're looking at a graphic, you want it to be something that's going to pop, something that's going to communicate, something that's going to relate to them. I've seen lately, especially, and I'm not completely against it, but, people just kind of gotten more into kind of just a frilly kind of design or whatever else, something that looks kind of good, but it doesn't necessarily communicate anything. The bottom line, and especially a lot of our cards that we have done, have people on them, because people more readily connect with other people than anything else. So obviously, if you're going to do a marriage and family thing, you want a married couple on there, or you want a family, you want something like that that's going to connect to what you're trying to communicate to them. And that way, people can sit there and they get it and they say, oh, you know what? This is kind of like who we are. This is us. We need this. We need to come and be able to do that. So that's really what you're kind of looking for. You're wanting something that's going to, appeal to the person. It's going to communicate to them. It's going to basically get them to hold that card just a few seconds longer, if you will, to do that.
All right. So do enter your questions on the chat bar on the right. Hopefully your brain is spinning a little bit now from the input that Charles has given. What's your specific situation, and how can you maximize mailing in your specific situation? So Charles, so you do a postcard, and it's beautiful and it's got a nice message, and the person says, now what? How do you come up with the call to actions? What's some of the creative call to actions that you've seen that's been successful?
Basically here again, first of all, you need to have some kind of, invitation. The bottom line, I think people miss that out more than anything else, is just to simply say, hey, we want to invite you to come and be a part of, our church. We want you to come and visit us. Come be our guest. Come out, find out how to be how to have a better life, how to have a better family, that sort of thing. One of the things too that I think is important is making sure that you put other information on the church, on the card, talking about, hey, we have children's ministries, we have youth ministries, we have things for singles, we have things for married couples. All those things are going to be what I call hooks in the water to be able to connect with those people that you're getting it out to. So, sometimes, a lot of people kind of want to have the billboard type approach. They're like, hey, we just want to keep it simple. We don't want to have a lot of writing. We don't have a lot of clutter. And I get that, I understand that. But if you only have about 20 to 30 seconds to communicate as much as you possibly can to somebody about who you are and what you have to offer, you need to have a little bit of a text on it. You need to have a little bit of more, hooks in the water. And so even, let's say, for an Easter type mailer, a lot of times I'll tell people, look, do your Easter mailer. The idea is you want to promote people to come on Easter. But if you have a sermon series that you're starting the week after Easter, put that on there. Starting April 8th, we're doing a marriage and family, series for the next 4 weeks, culminating on Mother's Day, something like that. Or just, mention something about Mother's Day. Because what happens is people sit there and get a card and they're like, oh, well, I'm already going to be out of town this Easter, or I always go with my mom, on Easter, and so I can't come to this church. But you want to give them an opportunity to have another time that they can come and be a part of that. Here again, that's one of the reasons that sermon series can be so effective, because if you have a sermon series that's 4 weeks long and you have a title for each week, one of those titles may connect to some person that the others won't. And oftentimes I'll have a pastor say, well, we want them to come every week. We don't want them to just come to week 3, right? And to which I respond is that if you can have one person come just one time, isn't that better than not coming at all?
Right. Okay. Do you want to explain the offer that's available on our offer button on the right-hand side of the screen, that folks who are interested in working with you, direct marketing, and what you can do for them?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. Thank you. One of the biggest things here, again, going back to doing an effective direct mail marketing campaign, is one, making sure you do an adequate quantity and making sure that you do frequency. And so the whole idea is that, I know a lot of people are a little bit skeptical to get started, and they definitely don't want to necessarily commit, long term. And, we really don't want to necessarily make people feel like they're in some kind of long-term commitment either. But at the same time, what we see, especially around Easter, a lot of times we see people come in, they do one mailing a year, they get a little bit of response, but it's not as effective as it could be. And the reason is because if you only do one time to these people, you're not connecting with them enough to be able to get that kind of response. We always see a better response on the second time a church mails, a third time a church mails, than the first and second time that they mail. And the reason is because it takes continuity. It takes that consistency to go there. So basically, obviously we do, 15,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, price points. If you want to do that much, that's fine. But most people just starting off, 5 or 10,000 mail piece campaign is adequate and good. And so what we're basically saying is that, we're going to give you a discount just by signing up. If you just want to do a one-time mailing, we're going to give you a discount on that mailing. But if you are willing and wanting to commit to a longer term relationship, to do 3 mailings over the rest of through the rest of the year, because I think that's what's going to be the most effective way to do it, then we're willing to give you X number of dollars off of each of those mailings. And that's pretty substantial. If you look at it, I mean, $600 off of a 3 mailing campaign, or $900 off a 3 mailing campaign. I mean, that's a pretty substantial amount of cost, considering that, about half of your mailing campaign is going to be postage anyway. We're basically saying, look, if we can cover our costs and we can introduce you to do direct mail and help you do it effectively, then we've done our job, and you can be happy about what you've been able to solve there.
Right. So on the offer, there's 2 offers, right?
Yeah. Basically, one is here again, just, to me, the second offer, which is doing multiple mailings, is really the way to go, because I think that's where you're going to be most effective. But I understand here again, just like I said, people are kind of scared to want to commit to that. And again, it is going to be a little bit more cost. That the offer number 1 is basically saying, if you're willing just to commit to one offer, in fact, I'll say this on top of those offers today, if someone's willing to do offer 1 or offer 2, and they're willing to do something within the next 4 or 6 weeks, maybe they're going to do a Mother's Day mailer. If they sign up within the next 24 hours, let's say, I'll give them an extra $100 off that first mail campaign.
Okay. Now, Truth Advertising, you are very cost conscious, right? Because you understand churches. So there's other things you do to help control the costs for people doing direct mailing that's outside of the printing. Explain some of those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, is that there is a nonprofit postage rate that the post office offers, which is great, thinking that, a government entity actually is giving a discount to churches. But, that is a substantial cost savings. And so basically the postage is about half of what it would be if you were a business down the street doing the mailing. And so what we do is we help you. It's free to do, but you have to fill out some paperwork. You have to send it to the post office. You have to get it all done. So we help with that process of doing that. So that's obviously one of the ways that we want to help you save costs. The other thing is just our prices. If you go out there and look, you're going to be hard pressed to find somebody else that has lower prices. And I didn't really mention this in the opening, but Truth Advertising is basically a ministry arm of a larger secular business that the owner started 30 years ago here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so, he owns his own printing and mailing facility. He owns, he has all the designers that he has along with that. And so basically, he has these resources at his hand that he says, I want to give churches a better chance, a better price, so that they're not having to spend all this kind of money that maybe a regular business would have to do. So we really try to basically, we can't give it away, obviously, but we basically want to cover our costs of doing business and help churches reach people for it. Is really the bottom line. So
on your website, I also see you do a free demographic study.
Yes.
And you get the free marketing kit and all hundreds of samples for that creative process.
Correct.
Right. Okay, so there's this component to maximizing the direct mailing of understanding their community. And so before the direct mail, they want to know who they're reaching or talking. What's some of the processes of learning about their community so they can match the message?
Absolutely. I mean, I think demographics is one of the first places to start. I talk to people all the time that, they think they know who their community is. And when they get these demographic reports back, they realize, oh, well, there's more, families here with children, or there's, more people that don't have children here, or the age of people is older, or even looking at things like if you see your community, the average household value is $400,000, but the average income is $40,000. You realize, hey, these are people that are probably going to be more stressed financially than maybe I realize. So that's kind of just a surface way. I mean, I can go and look at an area and kind of have an idea maybe what that is like. But bottom line is being in that community, each pastor, each minister is going to probably have a better opportunity to know more about who that is. But if you're going to be able to do an effective marketing campaign, here again, by being able to meet those needs of the people, you're going to have to know what those needs are from those people. So.
Okay. If somebody in the chat box can just get a confirmation with me that you do see the offer button, it is there. I don't get to see the other side of the screen here to make sure that it's working. But if you can just chat and say, yeah, the button is there, it does work. I'd appreciate that. So, Charles, the direct mail is powerful. I'm very excited about the saturation, getting the right message to the people, building that relationship, seeing the results, talking about people's needs rather than talking about our church is 100 years old,
right?
Type of things. But what kind of other channels complement direct mail and can help multiply the results?
Absolutely. Great question. And here again, like I said, word of mouth is huge for any church. And one of the things I see is that when you do a direct mail campaign, that empowers people to do word of mouth. One of the things we do is we give you an extra 300 minimum postcards that are not mailed for you to use for your congregation, for them to pass out, or they can even write on there to someone they know that's outside the mailing area to invite them to come. You know, when people have a tool like that and they know as a church are doing it, that's going to help them be one. Obviously, your social presence is going to be big. You know, your website, all those things are necessary because they're going to have a compound effect for you to do an effective direct mail campaign. One of the things you mentioned about going door to door after doing a mailing is that when you send a mailing out there, for whatever reason, it adds validity to you as a church. People all of a sudden think, oh, wow, you must be, you know, legit. And so then when they see maybe even the social media or someone else and comes and talks about it and say, oh, yeah, I know that church, you know, I got it, you know, they don't even know why they like you or think you're okay, but it's because they got that mail piece. So all of that works together in a synergistic type effect in order to have a great marketing campaign. So,
okay. Can you share with the folks maybe one or two samples of you working with the church? They were a little nervous about it. You had a successful campaign. What were some of those success factors and the outcome?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the churches that probably started working years and years ago. I mean, I think he may have even started slightly before I even came on Truth Advertising. He basically started with about 20 people. And, you know, he didn't even have the money to necessarily go. In fact, he went to some other churches in the area, which I find, you know, just a kind of unique, you know, in the fact that I'm surprised it even worked. But he basically asked them to give him $500 out of their mission budget to help do his first direct mail campaign. And so he started bringing in people for that. And he eventually started doing 2 or 3 a year. And just eventually, over a period of several years, he grew from about 20 to about 140. Now, I'll tell that kind of as a story because here's an opportunity where this church didn't have really the means, didn't really know if it was going to be successful. You know, obviously, you know, it's bad to ask money from other churches and then basically say, well, it was a waste of money, you know. So, but here's a guy that basically found success. You know, sometimes, you know, it's great to talk about the church that had 200 people and all of a sudden went to 400 overnight. And I've got those stories too. But the reality, it's those average churches, those typical churches that people are a little hesitant. They're like, hey, I don't know if I want to really spend the money, but I know we need to do something. I could tell you probably story after story of people saying, you know what, I mean, we're still not maybe getting the kind of result necessarily all we want, but we haven't found anything else that's been as effective as direct mail. And if we can bring in 3, 4, 5 new people each time we do something like that, it's worth it. So.
Okay, so we want to talk about doing a bigger and better Easter next year. So what is the typical planning cycle and time to maximize a direct mail?
You know, really, we only need about 4 weeks to kind of put some together. We can probably do it even quicker a lot of times, but you know, in order to do the design, the print, you know, give time for the post office to deliver, shipping times, you know, 4 weeks is an adequate time. You know, a lot of people say, well, when should I get this piece in the mail? Well, even for Easter, if you can get it pretty much the week before, I mean, much longer people are going to forget about it, you know, so if you can get it pretty much the week before, you're going to be adequate and be able to market that. So, but I'd say just one of the biggest things, even preparing for next Easter, and the reason I say this, because this is what we face with most people, is that, you know, one of the things you can start doing today is start creating a culture of basically where you're going to reach people in your community. Start creating a culture in your church right now, because people need to start having that buy-in, and then start putting some money in a budget toward it. I mean, you know, people tell me all the time, well, they can't afford it, or that's more than they can spend. Well, if you start saving up $100 from now to next Easter, you'd be able to do a direct mail campaign. So, you know, it's hard for a lot of churches, but you know, you spend money on all these other ministries and other things, but one of the things that most churches don't have is an adequate marketing budget for doing that sort of thing. So,
right. Would you advise them to not wait till next Easter to do direct mail, but start that relationship building, branding, so that at Easter people are more confident with you and who you are?
Absolutely. And they're again, going back to that offer, one of the reasons that we're making that offer, if you do 3 mailings between now and the end of the year, we'll give you that discount. And the reason is because if you start doing a mailing now and you start building within that community, by the time Easter rolls around next year and you do a mail, people will already know about you, they'll be wanting to come, and you'll have a bigger turnout than you would otherwise. It just takes time. I mean, we typically say it takes 7 touches in order to reach people, but you have to kind of, you know, plow the ground and foster the ground. And if you continue to do that, even if these people don't necessarily attend now, because it takes time for people to come around, when next Easter comes, because it's the most, attended time of the year. People are going to respond to that mail if you've done your work before that.
And can you give us a ballpark of a 5,000 or a 10,000 mailing? Of course, it depends on the size of the card and things like that. But what's a ballpark that a church is looking at?
Absolutely. So a 5,000 piece mailing of our standard 5.5 by 8.5 card is going to be about $1,700. That's without the discount. And then a 10,000 piece mailer is going to be about $2,600 without the discount. So, that includes the nonprofit rate postage. That's everything included. So you're going to be able to do an effective campaign just by doing that.
So it does include the postage?
That does include postage. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So any last minute questions, if you put them in the chat, and there's about a 3-minute delay between us saying it and them doing it. So we'll hang out here for a little bit. Really appreciate Charles coming on, and boy, you got my brain gears moving. Hope that the ministers online's got their brains working. Do take advantage of that offer. You're going to save on costs, and I think you're going to see some significant results, especially if you do the whole work. So the copy being right, et cetera, and so forth. Can the campaign be linked to social media or website?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you definitely want to do that as much as you possibly can. And, you can take any of the graphics you use for the postcard and put it on your banner, put it on your website, put it on your social media, all that kind of stuff.
Do you have graphics and pictures that you can provide for the postcards, or do they have to provide their own?
No, absolutely. Yeah, we do. And we have a ton of sample designs we already have, but we also have a resource of 20 million images that we can, download anything from. So.
All right. Have you had any experience with the QR code, or would you just give them the straight URL?
We were doing it pretty regularly for a while, but we haven't done it as much recently. I think it was kind of one of those things that kind of came, but, hasn't been really taken off in a lot of ways, but absolutely we can do it. I think it's a great idea. I think if you're going to do a QR code, one of the best things you can do is have a 20, 30 second kind of welcoming video that's attached to it rather than just link it to your website. But a lot of churches don't necessarily go to that level to do that. But I think that if you're going to do it, that's the best way to do it.
Right. So do you help them if they want a landing page so that the landing page carries the same message as the postcard instead of sending them to their homepage?
Absolutely, we can do that, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, Charles, thank you for your time. Thank you for those that have joined us online. Those on YouTube, we'll give you a link to truthaDvertising.org, and go there, sign up, get their free marketing kit, media kit. It will amaze you, give you a lot of ideas, play around their website. It's loaded with testimonies. It's loaded with samples. And you're working with a company that's not new. It's been around 12 years. They've had success. They know the ins and outs. They're going to guide you through this process. You can do it on your own, but it's a lot more work, and you'll probably miss 2 or 3 of the key points that make it happen and stumble. So it is a good investment. Like I said, just put a few dollars aside every month, and you'll all have enough money to do a campaign. Take advantage of the offer and save you some money there. The link to their website is truthaDvertising.org, and that will be with this video on our YouTube page. Pass the word on for people that weren't able to join us on the website that they can go to the YouTube page. YouTube page is youtube.com/Finish Line Planner LLC, or just go to YouTube and search Finish Line Planner for this video, and it will show up on there for you. You can also look up Truth Advertising on YouTube as well, and some of their videos explain some of the different type of campaigns. Yeah, thanks all for joining. Thank you. We're getting a lot of thank yous and goods, awesomes from this chat box. Thank you, Charles. Everybody have a good day. We're looking forward to some exciting reports of revivals in some of your churches. Thanks.
Sounds great.